that's going to come on. Jenna, are you there by yourself?
Yeah.
Because we're just kind of taking roll. We'll get back to that in a few minutes about the roll call. I want to start with updates from everybody. And Altora, would you like to go first?
Sure, thanks. So pretty much we've been, in the last 2.5 weeks, putting 4 people through their mentorship process. So again, Carrie's a new one, so we're really happy to have her. And we're going to try to make her full-time as soon as possible. We have 3 others that we're waiting back to make sure that they completed their competencies or passed their back, all the other stuff. So we're real excited that we're getting more staff, that we're preparing for the increase of referrals that we have been receiving, especially from Multnomah County, which is really great. So that's kind of what we've been focusing on really strongly on the last 2.5 weeks.
And I want to, this is Joyce, insert here also, Jana, Lori and I were talking yesterday, and she would like to set up a little more time to network with you. Some of the stuff they're running into is getting from someone.
Joyce? Excuse me for interrupting, but my sound quality isn't very good. Is it with me?
Somebody, Jenny, do you know what the deal is?
Yeah, everyone would need to mute themselves because it's the feedback. So when Joyce is talking, if everyone can mute their computers.
Did everyone hear that?
Yep.
I guess you're muted, so you can't. Okay, so mute, and we'll do the same here. Mute unless you're talking. So Lori and Jana, I'm hearing, have some of the same issues with the hiring process and how to recruit, and well, recruiting seems to be going okay, but how to, I'm just seeing where it's difficult to find, like for every 3 people maybe you start into the process, then one of them doesn't work out for some reason or another. And so I think that Lori would like to be able to talk to you down south, Jana, and find out how it's going for you and share some of the same experiences. So Lori, is that everything up there?
Yeah, is that everything up there? Yeah, it is. Yes. Yeah, I'm good with that. Anytime, just shoot me an email, Lori, and then we can maybe set up a time to be able to talk. That'd be great. Or if anything just comes up for the moment, go ahead and give me a call. I'd be happy to answer whatever I can.
That sounds great. I'll probably be in contact with you next week when things calm down. Thank you.
Okay.
Do things actually get calm? That's the big question. So let's go to Yamhill couldn't make it today, and Center on Human Development, which is Eastern Oregon, couldn't either. And they have several people out on vacation, and they're just getting rolling. So just a difficult time for them. But Willard Ibsen, can you give us an update, please?
Sure. We're rolling along steady. We have about 60 clients right now. I lost another consultant, so I am rapidly trying to hire and bring people in. So I interviewed last week in Lane County, so I have a couple people that I've selected from that. So I should have 2 people start training in the next week or so. I interviewed in Douglas County yesterday, so we, I think, have someone there also, so I'll be training and going forward there. And fingers crossed, I won't lose anyone else, and I should be pretty good in the 11 counties and have good numbers there. So we're doing good. We're trying to keep our head above water.
Well, it's a pretty big job to get 11 counties going. I know you had a couple of them up and going real solidly, but this is some pretty fast expansion.
Yeah.
Okay, so from OTAC, we want to talk to you about continuing education a little bit, and Linda, you might want to join us on this. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny.
Did you guys all see the email that was sent out from Linda with the details about continuing education?
Yep.
Okay.
I got
it. So one thing we're going to be doing on our end, so every time that we have the webinar meetings now, at the beginning we're going to do a roll call, and anyone that's online will mark down your name, and then after the training we'll send out an email with the scanned certificate showing your continuing education hours for each training, and then also when we're doing the in-person quarterly consultation and training, we'll send out the ones that we've already done within the last couple of months. We'll send out certificates for those as well for all the consultants.
And for the go-to meetings we've had so far, we'll be sending out certificates for those too, this Behavior Network meeting. So from March on, we'll be catching that up in the next couple weeks and sending out those certificates. Linda, do you want to, well, let me ask this with Lori and Jana. Do you have any questions about the continuing education piece? And Linda, do you have any comment?
Actually, this is Lori, and I do have a question. If people or individuals are sick or they have appointments and they can't make these types of meetings, is there a way they can listen to the recording or that I can train them in a consult meeting that we have once, twice a month, and they can get a certificate that way?
I think that would be a question for Linda. Linda, can you answer that, please?
Yes, I can. The training actually have to be in person for the individual to get credit for it. Unless it's something, we might need to talk about presentations that are recorded that are available on the OTAC site. But it wouldn't be the same quality of being in person. I mean, you would miss the interaction, and questions wouldn't be able to be answered. So it's not the same quality as in person. I guess that's my answer. But I do have more to talk about as far as this continuing education business goes, non-OTAC continuing education. We're going to, I'm reviewing and revamping a criteria for review of training for continuing education, and when that is finished, I will send that out. It shouldn't be too long. So,
Great. Thanks, Linda. I just was concerned of, say, for instance, we have Jenny up here, and it's a 2-hour training, and then someone got sick, how they can make up for it.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to discuss that because, you know, you can understand, though, that training secondhand is not the same as being there in person.
Oh, I completely agree. Thanks, Linda.
So, Linda, how do you want them to discuss that? Do you want to take a couple minutes right now and discuss it, or do you want to wait until we have Center on Human Development and Yamhill County on the line also?
Well, actually, I guess what I would prefer is that Lori and Jana, you know, contact me, email or telephone, give me your ideas about that, and I'll, you know, gather it from Chris on and Daleen, and we'll discuss it here in central office and see what would be reasonable.
Okay, I'll do that, Linda. Thanks.
So, Jana, do you have any questions right now?
I don't have any questions, no. I'll email Linda if I have any thoughts on if someone's sick or not, how we can at least get partial credit for them, and then I'll just email her my thoughts on that. But I don't have any questions. Nope. pretty much what I got out of it is OTAC's going to be providing some training, and if we choose to want to educate our own employees, we just have to send a request to Linda for approval on the training agenda and materials to get the CEUs approved. Is that correct?
Yes, the delay is me getting unmuted. Yes, that's basically it. And
right.
I'm going to be sending out a more specific criteria for guidance, too.
Right, yeah. So I'm good with that. I'm good with getting some education from OTAC mixed in with
Somebody, did you, Jana, did you disconnect accidentally or something? We're just getting static. Can anybody hear me?
I can. This is Lori.
Linda, can you hear me?
Yes, Joyce, I can hear you. But I hear the static also. So it maybe Jana did get disconnected.
Okay, well, so we'll go on. It says she's offline, and I'm assuming she must have got disconnected accidentally. So I'm waiting just a second. There she is. Are you back, Jana? Well, I'm going to go on to the presentation for today, which is about adult learners. But I want to start off with a short discussion about the survey and the results from that. I sent out something last week that talked about the topics that were highest on the survey that we did several months ago. We sent out to everyone, had topics that were of the highest interest. And then I got some feedback on those last week, and so that's where the topic for today was generated. And one of the topics is about adult learners. The other one is how do we deal with issues like grief and loss and significant mood swings with in clients, especially TBI, stroke, and some of those kinds of medical conditions can have mood swings attached to it. Then the third high needs topic was difficult cases for brainstorming. Hi, Jana. I see you're back on. And just going over, you can see the document right now, going over what the top 3 issues were in the survey. And so I received some really good feedback from those. And it sounds to me like a major issue for consultants is getting people to really understand that training aspect, really understand the behavior plans. So I'm sharing some information on adult learners today that I'm hoping will help behavior consultants understand how to help people learn. And some of it has been strategies for teaching. It comes from the literature on effective teaching and effective presenting. And so we're going to go through that for the next 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion on it. So all of you might be thinking of different points that you want to bring up in relation to what you know about teaching and learning. So the first part of this is on who are adult learners. And it's helpful when we are going to be teaching adult learners to know some of the traits of them because they're of adult learners, because it's real different than with children. Adults respond to certain kinds of information in certain ways based on where our brain is at as we come into adulthood. And so these are characteristics of adult learners. They tend to want to be accurate rather than fast. And so training needs to be not too fast. Can't talk them through it too fast because they want to be sure they are getting it right. They're concerned with being right. They are very autonomous, pretty inner-directed, self-reliant, but at the same time, and especially a lot of the caregivers we work with aren't very confident people. So they're not going to necessarily show us right away that they're very self-reliant, but really they are. And it's one of the reasons they make good caregivers is that they're reliable kind of people and have inner motivations. Most adult learners are very self-directed and intrinsically motivated. The job itself motivates them. The interactions with the client, their paycheck somewhat motivates them, but for the most part, people are in this work because they find enjoyment in it beyond the paycheck. They enjoy people. They enjoy talking with people. Some of the caregivers, many of the caregivers I've met are kind of gregarious and talkative kind of people and are good at making other people feel comfortable, and that's why they do a good job at caregiving. But they do lack confidence a lot of the time. Short-term memory is not so good as we're adults, where long-term memory is much better. And what that means is we can't throw too much information at them at one time. But once they got it, it'll be there. Most adult learners like to be right, and that's pretty true of everybody, but I think we just want to be very sure that we're using principles of positive behavior support with our adult learners as well as with the clients in how we frame things and how we present it with a lot of do this, do that, rather than don't do this kinds of things. Then they'll know the right way to do it and feel good about having done it that way. Most adult learners are pragmatic and practical. They like real-world ideas. They like to know how to go and do it right away. They need concepts behind the idea a little bit. They need to know the reason why. Adult learners do find that important, but they want to know what's it mean for me in my day. So they're not so interested in a lot of conceptual kind of things. Where this is significant in particular is as they might learn about a certain condition. We just heard about one yesterday that's a degenerative kind of thing. That's kind of an unusual condition. And we want to give the we want to teach caregivers what that means, but to go into a lot of the neurology of it is probably not helpful to them. More what they want to know is what does that mean in their day-to-day job? How does that person skills and what are they going to be in a month from now? How might that look? How should they best interact with that person in helping them physically get around, that sort of thing. So when we're giving information, it's not so important to have a whole big long definition of some of the conditions, but rather what does it mean in their interactions with that person. Adult learners are experienced, and they like to be able to share their experiences, although they might have some anxiety from past bad experiences. And usually when we bump into people who have kind of hidden agendas and I don't want to do this sort of thing, it's because it hasn't felt very successful for them in the past. So we've got to look at their strengths as well and how we can build on their strengths to help them be more successful. And I also got feedback from one of the consultants had a great idea, a great input into this also, is that she runs into people who don't want to do something because it's contrary to their own beliefs. Well, that's a tough one because our world is really operates on our belief system. But we can, it's called a paradigm shift, we can change people's belief systems if we are able to interact with them on, and we'll go into this a little more on training approaches, if we can get into the emotion of the experience a little bit more. So when we talk about beliefs, we start to use words like I feel and I believe instead of just it is. So sometimes a vocabulary shift on the trainer's side will help that person make that paradigm shift. A paradigm is that we see the world one way and we want people to open up their minds and view it a little differently, to change their paradigm about how they're approaching things. So to do that, we have to shift their beliefs. Sometimes it helps to understand what that belief is and why they have that belief, and then we can help them see where that can be modified. But we're respectful of people's beliefs. That's important in positive behavior support. So we're always looking at a way to modify people's beliefs, maybe expand their beliefs, but we're never going to just say, well, no, that's wrong. You just don't do that. Where adults, especially adults in social services, are natural problem solvers, but they need time to think to solve the problem. They naturally jump to solutions. Now, some people's whole problem solver, I don't know, I call it kind of their bag of tricks, works faster than others. Some people process problems really, really fast, and some people have got to ponder it for a little bit. And that's just a person's personal style. It's not so much whether someone's brighter than the next person. It's that some people just need pondering time, they need thinking time. When we're doing training, I like to give people, well, I did it at the start of this. I gave a prompt that everyone please think about your own ways to teach, and then at the end we'd like you to share some of those so people have a chance to process that. Some ways to give people a little thinking time. Sometimes people need nothing going on when they have that thinking time, so we might throw a problem. John urinates in the elevator. And so that's our problem. Well, no, we're not just going to, we have a behavior plan in hand and we're teaching people about it. So we might have some solutions we've thought of, but then we say, well, okay, here's solution A, here's solution B that we've thought of. Now let's take 3 minutes to think about how we might make that happen. And then just to be silent for 3 minutes. Don't talk to people at all and let them just think. And then at the end of that 3 minutes, then you bring them back into it. And for some people, that is very, very valuable time. They reorganize their thinking, and that's where sometimes we can get paradigm shifts in people too. Mostly adults, for the most part, adult learners really are, it's not ego either. They know that they know, and sometimes in a training situation, they hang on to that pretty hard. They really feel that's a big loss if they feel that they are losing something there or that they're wrong, and they might be wary of risk. So we've got to just give that person a little bit of time to process through some of that emotional side of things. Training is not just a process of people thinking, it's a process of people feeling as well. And it's helpful to know that because we're coming in with a behavior plan that's talking about what they do on a daily basis or what they do regularly with a client. And so that's got a lot of emotion in it in general. Yesterday I observed a behavior plan being taught, and toward the end of it, the actual, and it wasn't at all, this stuff is just so emotional for people. The caregiver actually had a few tears because, and she was thinking in a kindly way of the person that she gives care to. They just have a lot of feelings for the people they're giving care to. If they get rushed, when you feel like someone, if they're if they're blocking or getting resistant, it may be just that it's moving too fast for that person. It may not be that they don't like your ideas, but sometimes we just need to slow it down. And sometimes when we feel they're blocking, it's helpful to say, tell me what's going on right now, or tell me what you think of this, something kind of open-ended like that, so that you can surface those feelings and then you can actually address it with them. We're not getting into arguing with people. It's just helpful for us to know what they're really thinking. If they don't like what we're saying, when we leave, they may think they're just not going to do that anyway. So if we know going into it that they're not liking the plan, then we know we can do something to collaborate with them to modify that plan. Adult learners often think aloud, and so if they go back through, that's where it's helpful sometimes to do things in teams so they can talk together. And even in a behavior plan training, there's still things to think about in a teaming sort of way. Adult learners also use what is called socialized politeness, and they're just being nice. They're sounding like they're acquiescing, where in fact they're just cooperating with the meeting. But when they get done, they really aren't going to do that thing anyway. So it's helpful to get feedback from people about where they're at with it and what they're thinking about it. Learning's maximized in 10-minute segments and a 2-minute break to reorganize their thinking after 10 minutes. Research shows that it helps for long-term retention a lot. If we skip to my second page here, you'll see a visual representation of what people actually get in their brains based on what we tell them. So 2 weeks after we do a training, they've only retained 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they see. So visual representation of a plan is real helpful too. Some way that you've illustrated what they might do. 50% of what they see and hear, like watching a video, looking at an exhibit, watching a demo, seeing it done on location, watching you do it as part of the training, is really helpful. Now that's passive training where they're just taking it in. Active learning actually has them participating, and last time we talked about they watch it, then you do it together, and then then you watch them, and that's active learning. If they tell you in the end of it how this is going to come together, that helps them retain the information much better. Some fun things can be doing a dramatic presentation, but this comes from a classroom, and so we're obviously not going to do that for behavior plans, but role-playing can be the same kind of thing and help people a lot because it's more active. In role-playing, you're simulating the real experience, or you actually go with them, with the client, and actually do it. And then you get 90% retention, which is, of course, really good, and then people are going to be able to move on with what we're asking them to do in the behavior plan. So I'm going to back up here to training approaches then. When we train, if we tie the information to things that are already known, it's really helpful. And so because then the brain has something to tag that information with, is kind of what's called. So as the information comes into short-term memory, it gets retained into long-term memory if it can attach itself to other information there. So the more you talk about what they already do, what they already know, especially like along person-centered lines, caregivers know a lot about person-centered care, then we attach to that, and we're going to get more follow-through from them on some of the things that we're asking them to do. So you might say, well, when you're going through a magazine together, maybe that's something this person really likes to do, then that's a good time to also talk to them about how to set up their schedule for the day, or I don't know. I don't have a good example off the top of my head right now, but track into their information they already have and already know, and a lot of times you can get that from what you see them doing. Paying attention to the words you use as you train is really helpful. If you have words, experience, and concepts, that helps put it into long-term memory better. So especially that's where storytelling is very helpful. And then before you end it, summarize what you've said. And you might even have a summary, a small summary of something that you've written out. We don't want to replace the behavior plan, but we want it to be some way that they can recap it. And I kind of like things that I just write out for them as we go, so that it's not something I leave behind. So like I'll have a piece of paper and just I'll highlight the steps of what it is they're going to do. We want to use active participatory techniques or strategies which tap into the experiences they've already had. This comes back to using their prior knowledge, that what abilities and skills they already have. So we want to build on what they know instead of total new concepts. If people have a lot of experience in dementia care, for instance, then we can say, well, as you know, in dementia care, we do blah, 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 blah. And then here's something else I think we can add to that that'll round out this experience for John, or whatever the client's name is. It helps to retain into long-term memory, also to go from simple to more complex, to build as you go. And I know the form doesn't necessarily lend itself that way, but if you have steps for how you want to do things, not steps so much, but different strategies, you might start off with the most simple ones. And then give clear instructions. The biggest thing I see as I look at behavior plans is they're pretty wordy. Bullet points and very succinct wording really will increase the follow-through on those plans. We want to give the reasons why we are suggesting that, but we don't necessarily have to write that part into the behavior plan. We can also just tell them that part. So the rationale for why we're using that strategy isn't as important in the behavior plan itself as the strategy itself. If we get too many words there, they get lost in the words, and then they have a tendency to kind of let some of the strategies fall away over the first month, for instance, that they're doing it. I've seen, and Jana, I don't know if you want to share one of your behavior plans at some point. You're one of the best writers, I think, in making succinct plans and being very specific on those strategies, and so maybe you want to send out a sample for all of us at some point.
Sure. I'm also very wordy, though, Joyce.
Oh, well, I've seen a lot of them that are pretty specific.
Okay. Yeah, I can send you a couple, and you can look through them and then decide if you want to use any.
Okay, great. So the next thing is in training itself, ask probing questions. And we're not tripping up people here, but a lot of times we want to know a little more about, okay, so here's the strategy I have that I've suggested. Now, how do you think that's going to work as John goes to do such and so? And one of the tendencies we have as a trainer is to talk a little too much right there. So just be quiet and then let the caregivers talk. And sometimes they'll take a minute to reorganize their thinking before they say anything. That doesn't mean that they don't have any ideas. So it's okay to have silence in the training after we've asked them a question for them to have time to answer. And I'll tell you, it's 30 seconds feels like a really long time, but it's actually time that they're thinking of what to say. And so then I'll, and if I'm really not getting any response out of people, then I'll say, well, Mary, what'd you think? Or, I'll call on people individually to draw out their ideas. And I'll usually go with someone who's more a braver person first. We already talked a little bit about solving problems together. And sometimes the strategy we write is written down so that we can save words on the paper so we can make it more clear. But it's a little bit generic. And so then how we would have that implemented for that specific client is sometimes problem solving can take place around that. In learning, there's a principle of relaxed alertness that's really helpful in how we do our instruction. And this is that we can have challenging ideas, but it needs to have a low threat level to the person. And sometimes a little bit of humor goes a long ways in here. And of course, the humor is never, never, never at the expense of a client, but more just some kind of, some people are just really good at being a little bit humorous. And that, they find that humor really helps people relax. And then so as we're bringing in a challenging idea, the first ones we want to bring in can be the ones that people are pretty sold on anyway. And so then that has a low threat level, and we can kind of save something that we know might be a little more of a hot button for a little while as people are relaxed and starting to share ideas, then we can bring that one in. Hands-on multisensory materials and learning strategies are real helpful. If they can see it, if you can visually, I'll do even stick figures for people to illustrate how we might go about do something, but also role-playing where you're the caregiver on someone that's being the client is a real effective way for them to see what you're talking about. And then for them to practice it on each other. And using true-to-life learning in which their emotions are engaged is really positive for long-term memory. And in fact, the research on memory shows that we don't just memorize experiences. Our emotion of that memory, our emotions at the time we're having that experience gets remembered also. So memory really is not just facts, but feelings at the same time. And so mixing in some emotional words, and it might be that the client is going to have fun if we do such and so, or John will feel relaxed, and feel and relaxed are both emotion words. Well, relax not so much, but feel is. So if we can mix in those kind of words. So that's what I had to share today. Let me get feedback on that and what questions you might have.
I thought this was a really good presentation. Thank you, Joyce.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm going to start with Lori. I'm going to put you on the spot for C. That's the problem with Alturas, is it's an A.
I know. What's up with that? We'll have to change our name.
So, Lori, what does this bring to mind for you, and what kinds of learning strategies have you encountered that have been successful?
I really like your idea or your information on the paradigm shift. I'm going to really pass that information on to the other consultants. The relaxed alertness as well. What I've seen and what a lot of the other behavior consultants have seen as well is really engaging them, bringing them into it. What do you think of this? Getting them to explain in an open situation what they have experienced with that individual, talking about real life stories because they see these individuals constantly. We only come in for a short period of time, so really engaging them to provide us feedback, making them feel important. Their jobs and their roles are extremely important, and they don't get enough praise, so making sure that we really admire their abilities and admire them as caregivers or providers. So that's establishing trust and rapport with those caregivers and providers, and then getting their feedback.
All of those are excellent points, Lori. I think that helping them to see their value is a really important issue, and it has a lot of emotion to it as well. And you know, we're not just going to tell them good job, but that we really value them. And I've noticed with this whole behavior support service that including the caregivers in the training is something that's kind of unique for them, and that they're really seeing that their value is greatly enhanced through that.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes they even feel more comfortable talking in a group in front of their supervisors. That's what I've kind of observed. And then the supervisor's like, oh, wow, that's a great idea. Why haven't you expressed that before? So, yeah, nice.
Great. Well, you know, I think sometimes it's what happens out there in the real world is that the supervisors do value their input, but people just get to doing their job and they don't have time to talk a lot of times. And sometimes we're bringing in that luxury of actually getting together and talking about things. And also then as I'm reminded as well in what you're saying and then thinking about what I just shared, when we get people talking in our groups, it can take 3 times longer than if we just share the plan. And we do want to keep the time from not getting away from us. So I sometimes will put an agenda there to keep things rolling along how we want to, or sometimes if you can see that you have some good learning going on, but it's not going to happen, then stop after 40 minutes at the most maybe, and then reschedule for a part 2 of it. And I know this is a lot of time out of the caregiver's day, but at the same time, it's well spent time because it means that we teach later, that the whole concepts of what we're trying to put in place really will happen first time around.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Jana. And what kinds of things does this bring to mind for you?
I thought it was good information, Joyce, also. I think that we need to encourage our consultants to start teaching right from the get-go, because just like with employees, we really never find out what their learning style is until numerous interactions with them. So I think in our toolbox, we need to have various teaching styles that we start using right away, so we can make sure by the last visit we've maximized the best approach with the provider. I also liked what Lori said about stories. I think stories, real-world experiences to the provider are super important. And so I think that that's really useful. I met with one of my behavior consultants yesterday, and we talked about modeling. Sometimes we're modeling and we see things and we're interacting right there with the client and modeling what a good approach would be. And sometimes we forget later to come back and say, did you notice when I gave them a choice with A or B that this worked in this case? And so this is what I mean by giving choices, or whatever you want to do. I think we forget that. But I find with providers, real-world stories is the best way to communicate interventions.
Well, I agree with everything you're saying, Jana. And sometimes what I find, if, you know, we start presenting and you just can't think of everything, so sometimes on a copy of the behavior plan for your own notes to jot a story or two down so that you remember to share those as you go. One of the things that's easy to happen for behavior consultants is to just start reading the plan, because it just kind of ends up being a time crunch and that sort of thing. And so if you have some prompts to yourself on the behavior plan itself, then you can stop and remember to ask certain questions, to think about how you're presenting that. So before you go in, think about how you're going to teach the plan and present it at the same time as the materials themselves. Plus, Jana, you said something else, and it's now leaving my brain. What was the first thing that you brought up? Do you remember the first thing that you brought up?
No, I don't. I think. I've talked about. You need to start training and teaching right away.
Yes.
Like you do with employees, because teaching styles vary, and sometimes people don't know what their teaching styles are.
Correct. And that's where I think it's helpful to start teaching right away. Yes, I absolutely agree with that, and that we can start teaching about positive behavior support right away. And then also, if we're always teaching in a multisensory kind of approach, and multisensory to me is that not only will people hear it, but they'll see it somehow. And then hands-on just means we're actually in the real world, either showing them or something like that. So that's all multisensory means. But if we're right away using a full multisensory approach with caregivers and doing that training, no, because then it doesn't matter what that person's learning style is so much, because we're hitting it with how people learn in general, learn best. And I also really think it's important, the other point that you made about debriefing, I call it, once you've shown something in the real world, like shown them an example of giving choices, to be sure to talk about that again later, that you did do that, and here's what I did. Because I know I do this. I can assume that people are catching the nuances of what I'm doing, but in fact, they're just there with me, and sometimes they're not really noticing what I'm doing. And if we're doing good strategies, they're not obvious. They're just a part of the way we do things, and so they aren't going to catch that all the time. But us,
right, I agree.
I just did that, and then the other part of it is we don't want to stop with the client there and say, oh, by the way, here, like the classroom lecture right away, and that's where it gets forgotten more than anything, because we need to wait when we're at a moment without the client right there. So that we can debrief on that a little bit. But I think that's a really good point, Jana, that sometimes we're showing things without talking about it afterwards. Well, that is all that
exactly. I think.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's exactly it. I think that, yeah, I was just going to say that, that's exactly it. I think that we do things because we're trained to do things when our responses that we would consider common sense, but to other people they don't see it as common sense. So we just have to remember that we're modeling all the time, and just to use those as teaching moments also. So I agree.
Some other teaching moments that we can have is paying attention to what those caregivers are doing, and as we talk to them later, using that as examples of how to do it. So when you did such and so with John, that was a really good example of the way we can start to give choices, and then let's add this piece right in there. So we're going upon what they already know and just adding a little bit to that. I see the caregivers when I'm out and around, they're pretty skilled. you know, they just naturally are doing a lot of really good things. And so it's pretty easy to reinforce, basically, what's already going on and just add to that a little bit. Well, thanks to everybody. And I'll probably be sending out in about 2 weeks a little more on the, I think next time, based on feedback I'm getting, that we'll talk about some of the most common difficult cases you're running into, not so much with how the training's going, but just the behaviors themselves, like maybe sexual behavior, maybe hygiene behavior. I mean, hygiene's one we do encounter a lot, but we've also talked about it quite a bit. So be thinking about other, I call them hot topics of behaviors of concern you're running into, and we'll be discussing those. And I think in that situation, we'll do a lot more sharing among each other for those cases you run into, and what are some of the barriers that you see happening, and then we can problem solve those together. Well, thank you, everybody. So
Joyce?
this is,
Excuse
yeah?
me, Joyce. Before we disconnect, I just wanted to say one more thing, and it has nothing to do with what you've been talking about today, completely off the wall. I just sent out to all the behavior support contractors a letter, a sample letter that Yamhill created, and they use that letter, they attach it to the evaluation form that they give to the administrator of the facility or the care provider, whoever they're going to be giving the evaluation to when they've completed the service. And so I asked for permission to share it. I just thought that it was really a good idea because it's something a little more formal, and it might encourage more participation in getting the evaluations back. So you'll see it in your mailbox if you haven't seen it already, and that's why I sent it to you, just as a choice if you think that it might be useful, because it's been pretty successful for Yamhill. That's all.
Thanks, Linda. I'm glad you mentioned that. And so I'll talk to you all later. Bye.
Joyce? Sorry, Joyce?
Yes?
This is
Yeah,
Lori.
go ahead.
Can I get your number so I can call you real quick? I have a question.
Yes, and I did try to call you this morning, so
Yeah.
connect,
I was in a
right,
meeting, sorry.
As soon as we hang up, let's connect.
Okay, great. I will
All right.
do that. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.